So, hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of CFO 4.0. This is part of an actual series where we're going to be digging in and diving into the world of private equity and PE-backed business. And with me to talk about that and other things as well today is Kim Dziuk. And I have to apologize to anyone that if I pronounce that wrong, Kim's last name is, I think, originating from Poland. So I've been practicing my pronunciation before we started this conversation. And Kim is the CFO, Chief Financial Officer of Adams Flavors, Foods and Ingredients. And so she's going to be talking to us about her history, her background, and how she got into the role of CFO. So welcome, Kim. It's so lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. Initially I started off in public accounting as an auditor. I worked for a CPA firm for a couple of years before I got married and wanted to take more of a backseat and be around for my children. So I went into nonprofit and worked my way up to director of finance and CFO in that sector for approximately 10 years. And then I had an amazing opportunity just through someone I knew to come to Adams as the VP of finance and really progress my career. I was looking for something more challenging. My children were in school. I was ready to take something head on and really grow in the role. So as I came to Adams, I got to do just that. They were working with approximately 5 different antiquated systems when I arrived. And I had the challenge of really integrating that into a new ERP system. So that was my first big task to onboard this new ERP and then really realign the finance team. It was kind of like an accordion as the job roles changed whenever you onboard and really streamline those processes. You're going to see that the workloads fall differently within those departments. So that was a great first step. And within the first year and a half, I was promoted to Chief Financial Officer, which is where I am today. I would like to let everyone know here that Adams is one of the oldest companies in the state of Texas. I think we're the 4th oldest. We've been around since 1888. The cornerstone of our business is extracts. So vanilla extract, almond extract, all of those types of extracts, as well as spices and seasonings. So we are an A to Z spice provider regionally here in Texas. So it's been exciting to really get to know this segment in manufacturing. Manufacturing is a whole new animal for me. So coming in, first big task, onboarding that new ERP system and then realigning the finance team and stepping up into the CFO role was an amazing experience. And then from there, I was able to go through the first private equity transaction. So we are private equity backed. I was in the first fund back in 2019 with our first investment group. And we transacted in 2022 into a new pool of investors. And with that came many challenges, lots of diligence work, a lot of management meetings, and all of which really helped the company professionalize and taught me a lot about the business. So we're almost 2 years into this new investment, and things are going very well. So that's where I'm going to leave
it. And there's so much in that, right, Kim? You've just literally set up that we're going to dig into all of those different things as we go through this podcast, because that's an incredible journey for both you and the business in a very short space of time. Going from not profit and having worked with a lot of not profits, I can understand that could have been quite a potential transition, but an exciting one, it sounds like. So tell me a bit about why, how you found the shift from non-profit into obviously Adams and what that experience was like for you.
So I really felt that I wasn't contributing anymore in my current role in nonprofit. And I wanted to step up to a new challenge. I've always been aggressive in my career and knew that I would return to the private sector at some point. So just through a friend. I learned about this opportunity and learned that the company was growing at an astronomical rate. And it would be a great experience as well as rewarding financially. So I decided to take the leap, which was scary to leave something that I knew for 10 plus years and jump into something that I had never even seen before. So that was exciting. Um, and then from there, it's you really have to dig in. And I worked a ton of hours to really engage and learn the business. And we grew incredibly fast. So from 2019 until today, we've more than doubled the size of the company. Yeah.
That's an awesome jump, especially when you're of that size already to go and to make that huge transition. And
Yeah.
and I guess you talked about obviously it being a big transition. Is there anything you did to prepare from that leap into from not for profit into obviously the private sector?
I think I just had to get my mind right. I knew that this was going to be a challenge. I knew that I was going to really immerse myself in the work and that I wanted to do a great job
Mm.
and help this company get to where they needed to be. So, leaning into it, making sure that I had the right attitude every day when I showed up. There was going to be problems every day. We knew that there were going to be challenges, there were going to be problems, things were not going to go smoothly, but you had to approach it with that positive attitude, stay calm, composed, and really just work through each one. It's brought us excellent success.
And obviously, there's been a massive growth journey. So, when you look back at what you did within finance, how did you prepare the finance team to support that growth and to get you into a position where you were almost able to manage that scale?
It's been quite a challenge. I don't pride myself in stating this, but whenever you arrive at a new company, sometimes you have to look and see if the people are in the right seats, in the right positions within the organization. Just because someone's been there for 20 years or they've been doing something a certain way for a long amount of time doesn't mean that that's going to get you where you're going in the future. So with that, I had to reorganize and turn over a few positions to get the talent level that we needed in those roles. So that was one of the most challenging parts, and that took me about 10 months to really turn and go through and restaff up and get the team where they needed to be.
And you talked about bringing in the right talent. Was it a mix of you were looking for the right mindset to support the growth? Was it a skill set that you were looking for when you were recruiting the right team?
Great question. I always look at attitude first. If they're willing to learn, I'm willing to meet them. And so for me, it was more of they're really just not leaning into it and they're not putting in the amount of effort that is required. I think that capacity was not necessarily the primary issue. I think it was more they were rigid and unwilling to change. They wanted to continue to operate the way that they had for multiple years, and that really just wasn't scalable in the future.
And when you think about obviously that growth journey and private equity being a part of that, did you notice a big difference if you look like at, or think about what Adams was like before you got the first round of investment versus afterwards? Did you notice a difference in how the company itself operated and how finance was expected to operate in that transition?
Absolutely. I think you're required to professionalize and step up. So it's something that the company needed in order to scale the growth. But absolutely, the level of reporting that was required, the kind of communications with the board, everything has really leveled up, and it's helped our company level up.
And what were some of the changes you saw in the demands on finance itself?
I would say that the biggest change was in budgeting and forecasting. Uh, Previously, we didn't have a very structured process. It was more we're going to write on a whiteboard. We think we're going to hit 30 million in sales this year, and it's going to come from X, Y, and Z customers. And now we are required to have basic forecast in the ERP systems that roll up through the costing and the pricing, and we can see what our actual potential sales will be, our margin. And it's a much more professionalized approach than what we used to do. It was more or less guessing. So it's much cleaner and much more accurate. And obviously, it's a step above where we used to be.
And did you know going into that transaction that there was going to be a change in the expectation of finance? Was it something that you were made aware of or that you knew? Or was it something that you discovered as you went through the process?
It's something I knew. And in fact, I was promised, because when I left nonprofit, we had a very structured operating system. I had a budgeting tool. And coming to Adams, it was almost being in the wild, wild west. Everything was just willy-nilly. We think we're going to do this. And I don't operate well like that. I'm a very structured, process-oriented person. And so I took that as a personal challenge to really bridge that gap and get them to where they needed to be with structure, process, policies, security administrations in the ERP system. We can't just have people going in and entering random numbers. So I wanted it, and they promised me that we were going to get there. So together, I worked with the PE group, and we really bridged that gap.
Oh, no, that's great. And that it was something that you were looking forward to. And and I guess it's great you've got to have that top level support for those kind of changes. It doesn't happen, as an individual leader in finance, it has to be supported by the wider business. So it's great that you kind of had that backing. And were there any other changes that you experienced? You talked about obviously professionalizing the finance team and the wider organization, but was there anything else that you noticed about, both good or bad? Because I think there's always, we always try and look on the rosy side of things, but was there anything else that you noticed as you went through that transition that was maybe unexpected?
Yes. The amount of IT infrastructure and programming and development that was necessary to create the dashboards and the reporting in the ERP. I think that everybody thinks, okay, we're just going to onboard this new ERP system. Everything's already set up. We're just going to press buttons and it will automatically work. Basically, you hit an on button and it'll run. That is absolutely not the case. You basically have to customize it, tell it what functions you need, which we're a very specific and customized industry. Being a spice manufacturer, we have 4,000 different items that we're trying to complete jobs with every single day. So extremely customized. And there's an extraordinary cost that goes along with this infrastructure and development that's needed. So I think that was under budgeted and underestimated in just the amount of customization that would be required. So we've done 2 levels of implementation. The first one was really to just get the data flow in the system. So we were basically collecting data and running our jobs on a day-to-day basis. And the second level of implementation was more really to tie in those dashboards and the more professionalized reporting and BI tools.
I think that's a really good observation, Kim. When I find it really interesting, obviously there's always a lot of pressure to get a system in. And yes, the time frame you need to go live with the system can be very different from the time frame by which that system is optimized to. And there'll be some people that say you can never finally finish optimizing your systems. Absolutely, I can agree with that more. But I love the fact that you've phased your delivery. That's a really great way to approach an implementation. Picking the stuff that's super important that you have to do, and then working on the next phase at once that core is in.
Yes, absolutely. I think everyone really needed to learn how to ride the bicycle before we started doing any magical tricks on the bicycle. So we gave it a good year and a half, and then we started enhancing that.
But I think that's it. You've got to have the right tools in place, but it does, that I think it's about also setting the expectation, because obviously you were going through, obviously the private equity piece as well as part of that, as part of this journey that Adams has been on. So what was their expectation, and how did you set the expectation from the business that it wasn't just a press a button and all of a sudden all these magic dashboards are going to appear?
I think it was that private equity group's first major ERP implementation with a manufacturer, which is completely different than implementing an ERP with maybe a services company, someone who doesn't keep a lot of inventory on hand or produce jobs every single day. So I believe at first they were also very taken by how much was needed to get us where we needed to be in this new ERP system. So they did push back, but ultimately were supportive and have been continuously supportive in our journey to continue to enhance and improve this system. Um, I think that we should have overwhelmed the project more on the front end, and we would have had a lot more success, potentially saved money down the road. But we tried to go with a more conservative approach, just use the staff we currently had, do a train the trainer approach. And at the end of the day, I don't think that was enough. And we were really pushing our deadline to get that to go live. Um, and it affected our top and bottom line that year, and in fact the next year as well. But lots of learnings, lots of reorganizing and moving people around into the right seats, and I'm happy to say that today we are in a much better and stable place.
And I think especially when people go into these kind of projects, and I completely agree. So I've worked across both manufacturing and service-based industry. They are very different in terms of implementation. So I both sympathize and understand where you guys are coming from, because it's so much more transactional and almost operational with a manufacturing system versus service.
Yes, absolutely. And there's so many things that can go wrong. You're constantly looking, where's inventory? Did you close this job? Did you apply the correct amount of materials that were required in the BOM? So there were a lot of intricacies, variances that we were chasing down at first. And I don't know that a services company would necessarily have some of the same challenges, but we worked through it and we got to where we are operating smoothly now. But like I said, the PE group initially was shocked. I think they thought this was going to be a $300,000 to $400,000 project, and today I think we're about 1.3 million in. And I've had to hire a full-time ERP developer to be on our staff to really help maintain the system as they update it monthly. And then if any of our customizations in the system break, which they do with each system update, sometimes there's little breaks in the code. He gets to go in and fix that. So it's been a challenge. And then of course it's created a new pathway here for Adams.
And as you look back, you obviously mentioned resourcing at the front, making sure that you can create capacity to focus on this rather than trying to do it lean, as it were. What other lessons did you sort of take from that implementation?
I think that you need to have more planning time. Overestimate it. Give as much runway as possible. Things are going to go wrong. People are going to get sick. People are going to go on vacation. There's going to be errors. You're going to have to research before you go live. So I would say be very conservative with the timeline. Over resource, over budget for the customizations that will be required. That way you have a smoother landing. I think it was very rough on the organization. It was rough on the teams even to really to meet those deadlines. And it did result in quite a bit of turnover in the company. Some of it good, some of it we were sad to see the people go because we thought they were great. But at the end of the day, we had what tools we had and we had to run with it.
Yeah. And it's always easy, isn't it, to look back with hindsight and go, this is what I would do differently. It's a lot harder to have that hindsight ahead of time. And I
Yeah.
guess, then in terms of the system is in, it's working, it's adding value to the organization.
Yeah.
What things do you think you guys did well? What was the good stuff that came out of, what did you think you did right in that implementation?
I think setting up the processes in the system, initially it was difficult, but understanding that, for instance, we needed a purchase order process. We never had that before. So we implemented that. We knew that we could not operate the way we had been operating. So really going in with the mindset of not only are we changing systems, we're changing processes, and we're putting in checks and balances. We're adding approval queues, purchasing thresholds, those kinds of things. You need to go in with that mindset of you're changing everything, not just adding a system. If you add the system and you continue to operate the way you did yesterday, you won't professionalize or improve. You will not realize any kinds of efficiencies that are scalable with the growth.
That is music to a consultant's ears, Kim. So I often say that actually we start with the process and we then go to technology. But it is
Yeah.
always really interesting going into clients where there is a reluctance to change the current state of play. And
Yes.
finding the balance, it sounds like you've gone through, of customizing where we have to, because we understand that there's a cost and an ongoing maintenance piece in there, but also looking at actually taking a step back and, do we need to operate in this way? And is this way that we're operating adding value to the business?
Yes, absolutely.
And when you think about the impacts looking back now, did you as a business go through a return on investment assessment? Have you tracked like the ROI or the outcomes that came from this implementation, or is that something you've just felt as you've gone through it?
I was not here for the initial review and decision process of what ERP they were going to go with. So I've never actually seen what the ROI was estimated to be versus what it is today. I would say that it's been a longer ROI just because of the amount of investment that we've gone through, but it really has allowed us to fast forward into efficiencies and take on enormous amounts of growth. I would say that you need to do your due diligence when selecting an ERP system. Get references, call anybody and everybody who has recently had a full implementation in the industry and segment that you're in. Talk to them. Don't ask them just about the good things. Ask them about the bad things. What were the challenges? What was unexpected? Because you need to be planning. And I think that was a gap that potentially Adams had when they were going through that initial process. They may have checked some of the references, but they all got glowing reviews and they didn't go over budget. And they really didn't take into account where we were and how much we would have to take on to bridge the gap and get into that new ERP. So that's just some hindsight. The ROI, I'm not certain of. I know that it's obviously much better, but it was definitely not what was presented initially.
And I think you said something really interesting there, Kim. And I think that's a key piece for any finance leader when they're looking at new implementation, is to think about, your team better than any partner or software provider will. So
Yes.
knowing where you are, knowing where your processes are at, you need to budget to where you are, not just where you want to be. Because it's really interesting listening back, and actually it sounds like Adams was going through this massive internal transition as well. A huge amount of transformation around processes, around people, and that change needs support and both from a partner but also internally. So that's a huge amount to add into an ERP project, as well as can we learn the technology, can we get our data in, all of that as well. So I guess that's something that people need to think about as they go in.
Absolutely. And it just so happens that as we were implementing the ERP, we were really tapped out in terms of capacity in our manufacturing facilities. And so our initial PE group infused 16 million in capital to really get us new high speed equipment in the back. And so not only was there a change with ERP, there was this new state of the art equipment that we were trying to learn to operate and function with this ERP. So that brought in itself new challenges.
Wow, you guys have really been on this massive journey as you over the last few years. That's a
Yeah.
what a transition from and with the I guess the tradition that was with Adams, the age of the business as well, going into
Yeah.
that new piece with new equipment, new systems, new processes, new people. It sounds like as well. That's a
Yes,
massive shift.
absolutely.
Well, obviously, with that transition, I probably was going to ask what you were about to say, but how did you support that? Like, and what support did you give your team and I guess the other execs within the team to actually help them with that transition?
There were a lot of meetings. So I would say having very structured and recurring meetings to work through the issues that were at hand. So it's not just about finance. Everything really ends up in finance. It starts in other departments and it ends in finance. So I needed to go to the procurement department and understand how purchasing was flowing. And then from purchasing, obviously, when the inventory arrives, how is it being received? Is it going into the correct lots? Are we able to track it? And then from there, you issue it to the shop floor and tracking everything because any errors trigger what we call variances on the income statement. And that can really affect your margin and it can cause audit issues at year end if you're not even able to make up what those were for. So it wasn't just about finance. It was about working with every single department to make sure that they understood what they were working with and what the ultimate role was for them to accomplish to make sure that finance was successful in the end.
And we've talked a lot about the fact that you obviously were going for a big systems change, but tell us a little bit about the shift to being funded by PE, by private equity. How did the business find that shift and that change?
So it's an interesting question. The company had gone through several owners. We had the person who initially started it, Mr. Adams, Mr. John Adams, and then there was his son who took over the business. So he was the second owner, and then we had our third owner, which was the grandson of Mr. Adams, and he decided to get out of the business, I believe, in the 80s, and uh, it was purchased by a group of sausage manufacturers, and they really just used it to blend their bulk spices that would eventually go to the meat market and prepare their sausage. So not really any kind of highlights on growing. It was more used as a vertical integration to reduce their cost of materials for making the sausage. So in about 2012, the investment group saw the potential in our brand because Adams has been loved here in the region for over 100 years. I can remember my grandmother having the extract on her shelf. That was just the most loved brand. So even though the older owners and the sausage manufacturers hadn't really shined a light or made any strategic moves to grow it, it was still really doing well and self-sufficient in the area. So the PE group saw the opportunity to come in. Some of the sausage manufacturers wanted to step out and build new facilities. And so they needed the capital to do that. So they bought them out. And the PE group, along with my CEO, took it to their first PE fund. From there, we hadn't had new equipment since the 50s, since the 1950s. It really has not been maintained well. I would say everything around here was duct taped and, lots of nuts and bolts going around the place. Just, you had a maintenance crew out all the time repairing. So I think the PE group saw the opportunity to infuse a large amount of capital which would allow us to take on a substantial amount of growth, get the high speed equipment in here that lowers your labor costs significantly. It, enhances your capacity. You can take on so much more volume. And then professionalize. So looking at how we were operating with the systems, it was more of a pencil and paper kind of operation and a whiteboard. So really bringing that up into the 21st century was one of the initial goals. So there's a lot of low hanging fruit for them. I think that they saw there would be an enormous return on investment, and it absolutely was. So from 2012 to 2022, I think the company grew 4 to 5 times the size it was whenever they initially bought in. And then of course in 2022 to now we've taken on another 25+% growth. So we're on a great track. I think it was a smart investment, and we're not done yet. We have a lot of growing to do.
Absolutely. And I love your ambition and your excitement around obviously the change, as it were. And say somebody else is coming into that that they're either going in through a funding round or they're considering it. What are some of the changes that they need to be aware of, they need to think about as they go in? What are some of the expectations that are different from a owner or family managed business to private equity?
I would say there's just a lot of structure. You need to have a good banking relationship. You need to have your financials in order. You're going to have an annual financial audit. You need processes, process. They will instill that immediately when they arrive, and it will be painful if you don't have some kind of operating procedures at that time. So just really having a review year with a CPA firm might be a good first step, because you can at least get your finances in the right direction before you would go and really move to the PE group.
And I guess from a perspective of, there's a lot of things that they expect. They expect you to have these good processes. How did you find that transition? As in, they give you a lot of support to make that transition, or is it this is the direction we need to go in, crack on and do it? What was kind of the relationship like in that instance?
We're very blessed. Our PE group, even the one today, they're more of partners than owners. They don't come in and delegate and say and dictate and say this is what you're going to do. They say we want to help you grow. We want to help you. So what could we do? How can we support you? And so we basically bring to them, this is what we're thinking. We're going to go off in this segment. This is the new items we're going to pursue. And as long as they can see the value add, they're going to support that and finance it if needed. So it's really been an amazing relationship. I know there are nightmare stories out there about private equity, but I'm here to sing the praises.
Amazing. And it sounds like, am I right in thinking you've been through a couple of funds? So have you worked with different private equity companies on this journey too?
Yes.
And I love them all. Did you find there was a difference in how that's great, because like you say, there can be a lot of scare stories around this. So did you notice there were difference in how they both operated, or were their expectations fairly aligned?
It's a great question. I would say as we went through the initial sell process, there are groups out there that really just didn't have the appetite for the food industry or manufacturing. So it was more targeted towards an ag/food PE group pool. And so I think we were lucky in that the individuals who ended up buying us really already kind of had that groundwork and understanding of the industry. Whereas I could see if you went with a group that had other service industries and they were in car parts or other things, that they really wouldn't understand the ebbs and the flows and how the commodity prices affect our cost of goods. There's so many factors that play in here. And so just really, we've been lucky to get the right group who truly understood the business. In that way, they were able to better partner with us.
Fabulous. And I think that's a great way. It's about finding the right fit, I guess, for your company, both in terms of industry, but also the stage you're at and the growth, your plans for the future as well. And finding that balance is always a challenge.
Yes, absolutely.
So very aware that Again, I could ask questions all day. I love having conversations with people like yourselves that have been on such a transformation journey. But at some point, I do have to let you go. So, but before I do, we've talked a lot about obviously transformation. Both in terms of systems, but also in terms of processes and the company transitioning and going on this growth journey. If looking back, if you could tell yourself, when you first came into the role, what you should think about, and what advice would you give your earlier self on the first day at Adams? What would you tell them to do?
I would say, don't try to eat the elephant all at once. Take it in pieces because it's so enormous. You cannot digest everything all at one time. So really focus on one problem at a time. Take it slow. Do it right the first time, and just be patient. Be patient, and keep believing in the process and the changes that are needed, because ultimately it does get you where you need to be.
Some very wise advice for your younger self there. Well, thank you so much, Kim, for joining me on the podcast. It's been a genuine pleasure talking to you about your journey and also the journey that Adams has been on, and what an exciting one. It sounds like an exciting one to continue. So if
Yes.
people want to know more about Adams perhaps, or about yourself, where's the best place to learn more?
I would say check me out on LinkedIn, Kim Dziuk, Dziuk, or you can check the Adams website, which is adamsextract.com. We're also on Amazon.
Amazing.
And like to get some of our spices.
I think you should definitely go and check those out as well. So for anyone that's listening and wants to jump on those links, don't worry guys, we'll pop them in as usual in the show notes. And a big thank you to Kim. Thank you for joining me on the show.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. You have a great day.